Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. The race to become Germany's new Chancellor is certainly hotting up, and in recent days a lot of attention has been focused on who the CDU-CSU power couple would choose as their new candidate to replace Merkel, with them finally picking the leader of the Christian Democrats, Armin Laschet, who won 67% after accounting for abstentions, in a secret ballot of, well, his own party's delegates. Anyway, more interestingly, the Green Party have put forward a candidate for chancellorship for the first time in their history, Annalena Baerbock. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what's led the Greens to put forward their first ever candidate for chancellor, whether Baerbock's actually got a shot at becoming Germany's next chancellor, and what a Green Chancellor could mean for Germany and beyond. Before we start, I'm pleased to announce that because TLDR is growing, we're able to move office into a new, bigger space. That means that we've got a lot to move though, so we're holding an office clearance sale. All of our merch is discounted, including badges for only $3.99. But we're also selling office things too, like our sofa and our fridge. No, seriously, we're selling them. So check out our store whether you want a discounted pin or a sofa. It's all linked below. A quick bit of background in case you haven't watched our previous videos on the German Chancellory race. Angela Merkel, the current Chancellor of Germany and a political heavyweight in Europe, is, after nearly 16 years at the helm, finally bowing out, with her deciding not to stand in the German federal election set to be held later this year. This more or less immediately created a scramble within her own party and beyond to put forward candidates for the chancellorship. Her own party, the CDU, actually puts forward a candidate in conjunction with their sister party, the CSU, with, until recently, it being relatively unclear whether Armin Laschet or Markus Söder would be chosen as the candidate. In any normal election, the race would be between the CDU-CSU Chancellory candidate and the Social Democrats, known as the SPD. We say race, but according to Politico's poll of polls, the gap between the two at election times hasn't exactly been small. In 2009, polling around the election put the CDU-CSU candidate at an 11-point advantage. In 2013, a 16-point advantage. In 2017, a 12-point advantage. So the CDU has clearly been on top for years. However, the SPD are, it appears, no longer in the race this time round. Recent polling ahead of the federal election puts the CDU-CSU at around 28%, with the SPD trailing at 17%. The Greens, however, are close to taking the lead at 21%, meaning that as things stand now, the Union only has about a 7 percentage point lead over the Greens. Polling by Forza closes that gap up even further to just 4%. And when you bear in mind that these polling figures are before the Union decided to back Laschet after their power struggle, as well as before the Greens officially put forward their candidate, things could become very interesting, with the Greens having a genuine shot at becoming a major coalition partner. This wouldn't be the first time the Greens have been ahead in the polls either though. Back in 2019, a poll put the Greens at 26%, ahead of the CDU-CSU Union, albeit only by a single point. It's this lead that the Greens are hoping to replicate and then extend as far as possible, which leads us nicely to their candidate, Annalena Baerbock. The co-leader of the Greens is the party's first ever Chancellory candidate, and decisively on the more moderate wing of the party, being described as part of the more pragmatic, realo wing of the party, and she's also got a pretty beefy background. She's got a master's degree in international law from LSE. She was elected to represent Potsdam in 2013, before going on to become the co-leader of the Greens in 2018. Together with her co-leader, that the Greens have moved more to the centre, with the more radical, fundy faction of the party seemingly receding. In 2019, the party went as far as to approve a programme that explicitly described the NATO defence alliance as indispensable, pointing to a much more beefed up foreign policy standpoint, and a far cry from what the BBC have dared to call a chaotic bunch of bearded hippies in sandals. Professor of Political Science Wolfgang Merkel, no relation to Angela, highlighted how things have changed so dramatically for the Greens, remarking, "The modern Greens are comfortable with the idea of political power. They know they need to dock in at the political centre to get it. They're highly professional and organised, and conduct themselves with an aura of responsibility that one would expect from a party already in power. The Greens used to look like they were forever in search of a programme. Now they are a party that looks above all like it's seeking office. When it comes to policy, the Greens manifesto isn't actually finished yet, with it set to be finalised at their party's conference in June. But the draft manifesto, published back in March, does paint a picture of what's to come. The Greens want to raise statutory minimum wage, which from July is set to be €9.60 to €12 an hour, with the change coming in immediately. On a similar economic vein, they want to reform the debt brake in Germany's basic law. Under the current terms of the debt brake, German Länder are prevented from running budget deficits save for emergencies, with the overarching federal government structural deficit, the budget deficit once you've taken into account the overall state of the economy, barred from exceeding 0.35% of GDP. For the Greens, the debt brake is not solely a brake on debt, but a brake on investment. In turn, they want to reform the debt brake to allow for more long-term investment to take place, obviously with some of that focusing on green investment. When it comes to environmental protection, the Greens want to see greenhouse gases cut by 70% by 2030 through an accelerated energy transition to renewables, with a specific focus on electric vehicles. Were the Greens to become the largest party, and Baerbock the country's next chancellor, things won't be plain sailing though, especially when it comes to the Nord Stream 2 gas project. As we've discussed in another video a while ago, it's linked down below, Nord Stream 2 is set to deliver Russian natural gas via the Baltic Sea directly to Germany, bypassing the current route through the likes of Ukraine and Poland. The project is actually 95% complete, well, the pipe part is, with only 120 kilometres left, 93 kilometres in Danish territorial waters and 28 in German. The issue being that it's a highly controversial project. Merkel defended the project as a necessary business transaction, and her party's successor, Armin Laschet, isn't expected to change tact. But the Greens are staunchly against the project, opposing it on both environmental and political grounds. The latter being ever more poignant in the light of Russian aggression near the Ukrainian border, and calls from the US President Joe Biden to abandon the project, which according to him is a bad deal for Germany, for Ukraine, and for our Central and Eastern European allies and partners. So, were they to be elected, the nearly completed project would likely prove to be very contentious. I say if they were to be elected, but things aren't necessarily going to be easy for the Greens, or even likely to swing their way. Support tends to be over-exaggerated in polls, and often subsequently fails to materialise on election day. They are expected to perform well in September, and in a country like Germany, you don't need a majority in order to win the election. Germany has never had a single-party government, so if the Greens could become the largest party, they'll have to enter a coalition if they want to lead Germany. The question being, with who, and what compromises will need to be made. So even if they do win, life might not be easy for the Greens. But what do you think? Is Germany about to have its first Green Chancellor? Is this the start of a green wave throughout Europe? Or has the pandemic simply allowed a party that may not be ready for power to burst right through the middle? As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.